It's not just the litigation against Illinois' gun ban that the state of Illinois has to tackle. You've also got lawsuits against the states over automatic license plate readers proliferating all across Illinois, and even a lawsuit against the Illinois House Speaker making headlines with staffers in his office saying that there is an environment of fear and anxiety. All of that we'll touch on here with Bishop on Air. Thanks for taking time with us each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us as we break down the latest in what's going on. And let's start with the gun litigation. Of course, we've been tracking what happens in the case in the Southern District of Illinois federal courts, where Judge Stephen McGlynn, he has the case where it's challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. And that case was decided on a preliminary issue last year, and you had a few of the cases lumped together, and they had a preliminary injunction in place. But then you had in the Northern District going the different way, and that went to the appeals courts, and the appeals court on a preliminary basis said the state had a likelihood of succeeding on the merits. So you now have people awaiting any kind of input from the U.S. Supreme Court, where they are expected to release an order list this morning. So it has yet to be posted. Looks like they've got that listed, possibly releasing some orders this morning at about 9:30 their time, 8:30 our time. So we'll obviously talk about that tomorrow, if indeed any of Illinois' gun ban cases on a preliminary basis are taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court, or if they decide to relist those. But let's take a look at where we're at in the Southern District of Illinois, where last month we talked about this. This is the docket entry. And the docket entry discussed some of the various deadlines. A joint report was to be submitted by May 24th. This is in the Southern District, all right, where they're expected to have a trial on the merits coming up in July. But the government shall provide an update no later than May 31st on whether experts David Martin Schreiber shall submit an amended expert report, or whether the government will rely on the expert report submitted earlier. If you recall, they couldn't get the expert Schreiber to get an expert report together, and somebody had pointed out to me that Schreiber was actually on administrative leave from his other place of employment. But regardless, some of the other deadlines here, you've got a status conference that's going to be happening later this month, where again we've got questions about how this is going to proceed, and are we going to see an actual trial on the merits come July, and that all possibly depends on whether or not the U.S. Supreme Court could take up these cases, and that could somewhat derail the Southern District case. So you've got that case continuing on, right? And the latest here is indeed the state, Illinois State Police, and the governor and the attorney general putting in a report and a declaration from Schreiber. Let's see if we can pull this up really quick to get a bit of an overview here. It's 113 pages. So again, you've got a lot of documentation that the court's going to have to read through and ultimately put together. So maybe if I get some time today, I can pour through that 113 pages of Schreiber's expert report that was filed on Friday. But that's not the only case where you've got challenges against Illinois gun laws. You've got the Myers v. Kelly case, which is challenging the state's FOID card. But it also challenged the state's measure that limits where people can sue the state government in state and federal, in state court, either only in Sangamon County or Cook County. If you recall, a few weeks ago, we delved into the order that the judge made, essentially granting in part and denying in part. Count 2 of the complaint is dismissed without prejudice, so that means it could come back up. If a case is dismissed with prejudice, they're not allowed to refile it, but dismissed without prejudice means that they could bring the issue of the court jurisdiction back up. But the first count was about about the FOID card. So the FOID card case continues in the Southern District Courts with Judge Dugan. But on Friday, you had a motion for extension of time, completing discovery, and amending the schedule, and that was filed by Illinois State Police. So Illinois State Police, again, requesting more time in this case, challenging the FOID card in federal court. So we'll be watching that as well to see just when that comes together. Because if you recall, early on in this case, last year, you had the judge spell out that they would be starting to tackle discovery around this time. But now we're still waiting on what exactly could happen in the Myers v. Kelly case challenging the state's gun and magazine ban. But again, not the only litigation there is out there. You have automatic license plate readers. If you're not familiar with what those are, I remember, back in 2006 or something, 2007, I saw these devices on the back of Springfield police vehicle, and they look like cameras pointed on each side, and I requested information from Springfield police. What are these things? And they took me on a ride along to show me the device, and it was an automatic license plate reader on a squad car, and it was able to go up and down the highway and ping all of the license plates. Now, this was almost a unbelievable, but 15 plus years ago, if not more, and it blew me away then. But now we've seen a proliferation of these cameras that are not necessarily on squad vehicles, but on light poles or on traffic signals, and they're just static cameras set up all around to be able to capture people's license plates. And there's a lawsuit now. The Liberty Justice Center filing that lawsuit. I connected with Riley Stevens. He is lead counsel on that case, and he talked about what ultimately the Liberty Justice Center is after in their challenge of the state's proliferation of license plate reading cameras.
So the Illinois State Police has set up a system of, it's about 300 cameras around Chicago. They're now expanding to add hundreds more cameras around the state of Illinois and 20 other counties. And what these cameras do is, every time you drive by, if you drive a car in the Chicago area, this is about you. They are tracking, they take your license plate in your car and they put that into the database. And when they decide that they want to investigate somebody, they go back and they have the historical record of everywhere they've driven, because they are tracking every citizen just in case one of them might be suspected of a crime in the future. And so we have filed this case challenging this system of basically dragnet mass surveillance among the entire citizenry, no matter whether or not you're suspected of a crime at all, and have said that this is not acceptable under the Fourth Amendment standards that are supposed to protect citizens from being searched by the government constantly in every activity of their lives.
So did you know about the proliferation of these cameras? Around 350, if not more, Illinois State Police acknowledge that in 2022, they had 289 ALPRs installed in the Chicago area. In 2023, 139 additional ALPRs were installed in Cook, St. Clair, Champaign, and Morgan counties. From 2024, the agency said it planned to install cameras in Macon, Madison, Peoria, Bureau, Lake, and Winnebago counties, with additional cameras in Boone, DeKalb, DuPage, Grundy, Henry, Kane, Kendall, LaSalle, McHenry, Rock Island, Sangamon, and Will counties, as well as Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. Now, if you look at an annual report on automatic license plate readers from Illinois State Police that was published in August of 2023, it showed the installation of Cook and St. Clair counties cost $6.6 million, and maintenance was $100,000. But the budget that legislators approved last week for the coming fiscal year includes $7 million for the Illinois Department of Transportation to install cameras and automatic license plate readers on state routes. So do people really know that this is going on?
No, I would assume not. I mean, certainly my clients, until I told them about this, they hadn't realized this was going on. And I think there's been coverage from the ACLU has done some work on this, and some other organizations. The Illinois Policy Institute has written some articles about this as part of their policy advocacy. But I mean, these systems are ubiquitous now, but very under-remarked upon, because I think most people just don't realize what's going on. So we are here focused on Illinois and their statewide program, because that's where we decided to start. But these things are everywhere. There are thousands and thousands of jurisdictions. It's not just law enforcement. Your homeowners associations installing these to keep track of who's in the neighborhood and whether they like who's coming to visit your house. And all this gets fed into, again, these national databases that aggregate everywhere you've driven past any of these cameras all around the country, anywhere that someone is a subscriber to the same database, which most of the law enforcement agencies have one or the other databases now. And they know everywhere you've driven. No one keeps the data for 3 months. Some other agencies might keep it for years and know every time you went to the doctor, every time you went to a political rally, a Trump rally, a Joe Biden rally, a Black Lives Matter rally, an NRA event. They know who left they started in 2019, so they know who was leaving their houses because of COVID lockdowns and who was driving around the town during that. And they just passed a special rule saying they can't share the information with the red states to prosecute abortion. So there's one limit they decided to put in Illinois on this, and it's that to prevent the enforcement of abortion laws if women are driving from Indiana into Illinois. That is the one. That and sanctuary cities. It's abortion legal immigrants are the two carve-outs that they're not allowed to use the data for, actually.
So, Riley, again, counsel for the Liberty Justice Center in this case challenging automatic license plate readers in Illinois. The case filed Thursday. Private parties use these. It's not just government, but private parties. I've heard, casinos setting these up. I've heard shopping malls setting these up. Homeowners associations setting these up. Is that also a violation of individuals' rights?
Well, so there's a difference in rights with the public versus private. So I had, the parking garage when I used to live in D.C. The parking garage, the movie theater, they used a system like this just to track the parking. So instead of putting your card in and getting a ticket, and at the parking garage, the cameras would figure out when you drove in and when you drove out, right? And I think there's a lot of privacy concerns with that kind of system, but the difference is that the movie theater can't throw me in jail. And that's the power that government has, and that's why we have more restrictions on government's ability to track our whereabouts at all times.
So what's the trajectory of these challenges? Of course, it's in the federal courts in the Northern District, but where are we going from here?
So we filed this in the Northern District of Illinois, which is the federal court that in Chicago. And so we filed the case today. We're going to file, probably a motion for an injunction to try and block the program, and we're going to litigate the case out. In terms of where we're going, what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish here and now that these systems of mass surveillance are subject to constitutional scrutiny and are subject to constitutional limits, right? I think, so much of our privacy protections were created originally in the era before computers, before the internet, before these technologies allowed this kind of mass surveillance. And our goal here is that we want to say that this is the moment to decide what the rate of privacy is going to be for the 21st century and how those rules are going to work in this era where technology has made it so much easier for the government to keep track of our whereabouts. There's a lot of discussion about privacy, and there's a lot of discussion about safety, and there's a balance because yes, these systems can be used to catch the kidnapper who's running away with the child, or who is a fleeing suspect or a missing person or some other such thing. But we can prevent a lot of crimes. We all put cameras inside our living rooms and bedrooms too, but we all understand why we don't want that level of intrusion into our lives. And so this, we think, is a line to draw and say that the permanent tracking of every citizen and all of their travels and whereabouts is a bridge too far.
Again, we're talking about automatic license plate readers, a conversation I had with Riley Stevens late last week. He's with the Liberty Justice Center suing the state over the state's use and proliferation of automatic license plate reading technology. Hundreds of cameras, and what it can do is it can essentially set up a grid. It'll show you every time you've driven by this location. Maybe you're leaving a shooting range, and then you're going to church, and then you're going to your doctor's office, and then you're going to a political rally or whatever the case may be. While Illinois State Police, they do say that they have certain protections in place to keep this from being abused, there's still those who are worried about it being abused. And that's why they're seeking a preliminary injunction in federal courts against the state of Illinois from utilizing these cameras.
Well, I think we'll have to see what the court is willing to do in that regard. Our ultimate goal would be that you either have to shut these programs down or you have to subject them to probable cause and warrant requirements. Right now, the Illinois State Police are just saying, trust us, we will only use this for appropriate purposes, but they get to decide what those appropriate purposes are. And I just don't trust them, to be honest, and I think that there needs to be, at the minimum, judicial oversight if these systems are going to exist, or they don't get to have it at all. And I understand that they're not supposed to use this to check up on their ex-girlfriends, but I get to see anything in the actual processes here that would prevent that. So we think that they're going to have to either shut down the cameras or they're going to have to be subject to the kind of probable cause and warrant requirements that other Fourth Amendment searches must adhere to.
So I reached out to Illinois State Police. A spokesperson said that they have directives and public acts that dictate how they access ALPLRs and how they use them and the data. It says law enforcement purposes only and in compliance with all applicable training, laws, and administrative rules. The data is maintained in the Law Enforcement's Archival Reporting Network for 90 days, they say. And it also goes on to talk about how, any kind of misuse and abuse of the system, software or associated databases, or data may be subject to sanctions and or disciplinary action. So we'll be watching that case closely. By the way, the Liberty Justice Center also has a case against the state's election law that ended the slating of candidates if they didn't run in the November election. Today, they're having their first hearing in that case, and you've got the deadline for the State Board of Elections to take those petitions for candidates, hoping to get on the November ballot, though they weren't on the March primary ballot. So we may have another conversation with a different counselor from the Liberty Justice Center after today's hearing in that case. But another high-profile lawsuit that's been filed in state court has staffers alleging a climate of fear against Illinois House Speaker Chris Welch. And again, go to thecentersquare.com where you'll see all of these stories and more. Thecentersquare.com. And I'll just read to you from this story. Alleging a climate of fear or anxiety, staffers at the Illinois Speaker's office are suing to get immediate recognition as a union and for the office to start collectively bargaining. The Illinois Legislative Staff Association says it filed in Cook County a motion seeking judgment that House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch is violating his constitutional duty to perform and carry out lawful business in the state. They say that we are done waiting for Speaker Welch to take responsibility for the lack of action on the part of himself and his aides. We are done waiting for him to take the initiative to do what's best for his caucus and the people of Illinois. We are done waiting for something more than reluctant half measures and poorly written messaging bills. Enough is enough. So the legal filing goes through. It talks about the plaintiff seeking relief with respect to the defendant's refusal to discuss wages, hours, and working conditions with the Illinois Legislative Staff Association as required by law. Staff Association said that Welch campaigned on the constitutional amendment to ensure collective bargaining rights of every Illinois citizen, but that he hasn't followed through in regards to the staffers' situation. So, again, a fascinating kind of story of the Legislative Staffers Union, which hasn't been recognized yet. And they go into even more detail about how they sat down with some of the Speaker's staff, and the staff said, hey, you're not a recognized union yet. You got to go to the Labor Relations Board and get a recognition. And the Labor Relations Board said that that's not in their jurisdiction. So they felt that was a fool's errand done with futility. And even a measure that was passed out of the House to set this up, they didn't like that measure, but it was never called up in the Senate. So now they feel their last resort here is to sue. So again, just a whole collection of lawsuits that we're keeping an eye on here in the state of Illinois. And again, we're also looking at the the latest in gun ban litigation, where we're still waiting on the U.S. Supreme Court to drop some orders here. So we may actually touch on that before the end of the program today. So I appreciate you guys being here with Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join me each and every weekday morning as we break down some of the stuff that you guys are most interested in. So shout out to those joining us. 253 people watching across several platforms. Look at that. Appreciate you guys. All right, it's Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. All right, make it happen.